Good morning. I'd like to call to order the March MTA Board meeting, which is held jointly with the Metro-North and Long Island Railroad Committee, the New York City Transit Committee, Bridges and Tunnels Committee, Finance Committee, and Audit Committee. We are conducting this meeting remotely via WebEx and conference call. The Governor's Executive Order 202.1 suspends the open meetings law requirement, and accordingly, any provisions in the MTA bylaws regarding public attendance at meetings and board members participating and voting by phone are also suspended. Now I'd like to ask Monica Murray to do the official roll call for the record. Monica.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Board members, I will now do the official roll call in alphabetical order. When I call your name, please verbally indicate your presence. Andrew Albert. Andrew Albert. Norman Brown. Here. Patrick Foy. Yes. Randy Glucksman. Rhonda Herman.
Here. Yeah, Randy Glucksman is here.
David Jones.
I'm here, present.
Linda Lacewell. Kevin Law.
I'm here.
Robert Lynn.
I'm here.
David Mack. Susan Metzger.
I'm here.
Heda Mahaltsis.
I'm here.
Robert Mujica. John Samuelson. Larry Schwartz.
Here.
Vincent Tessitore.
I'm here.
Neil Zuckerman.
Here. Here.
Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Monica. Later in this meeting, agency presidents and staff will submit procurements and actions for a vote. Your presence at this meeting and silence at the time of a vote will be considered an affirmative vote for the record. If you would like to vote no or abstain, please state your name and your vote. We'll now move into the virtual public comment period. Speakers were able to register on Monday and send in their video or voice comments. I note that this approach goes above and beyond what's required for public comment in the suspended open meetings law.
Good afternoon, everyone. We have 13 members of the public registered to speak today. The first 30 minutes of public comment will be delivered to the board meeting, and the remainder will be posted online for the public and board members on March 25th. I'd like to remind our speakers that in the interest of time and fairness, we will limit you to 2 minutes. Please be aware that we will be using a warning beep to remind you that you have 30 seconds to conclude your remarks, and then I will ask you to conclude your remarks. We appreciate your patience and understanding as we work through our first virtual public comment session. Our first speaker today will be Brian Thomas Burke, and for our speakers, we'll start your 2 minutes when you start speaking. So Brian Thomas Burke will be followed by Theo Allen.
Good afternoon, and thank you, MTA Board and the public. Yes, my name is Brian Burke. I am a whistleblower. I want to congratulate first Interim President Sarah Feinberg for her new position. I did reach out to your office last week. I spoke to a gentleman, Rich, not to name at this time, because of course he hasn't done anything wrong at all. Was very patient with me and listening to evidence of criminality by subordinates of the now interim president. I'm showing you a document that I conveyed to the Attorney General's office. This is a complaint against a subordinate, Mr. Daniel Chu, who has committed perjury, subornation of perjury, and other various felonies, fraud, etc., in involving wage theft that goes back almost 5 years against me because of my whistleblowing activity. Now, this is, of course, a criminal act. I received an email this week from actually my Congresswoman Maloney, is trying to get $4 billion to the MTA because due to the lack of revenue due to the coronavirus. Now, the problem is, of course, the vast majority of monies are spent on salaries, as they should be. Now, since the MTA has resolved to itself the right, which of course it doesn't have, to rob their employees, whether in my case it's sick vacation, overtime pay, and differential pay, obviously they don't need that $4 billion steal from the other employees. So I'm asking that Ms. Feinberg and the board instead reverse this policy of criminality, pay their employees, and then they would seem to have a right to the fiduciary responsibility to pay their employees as per rule. And per contract, I already point out that Mr. Chu claims that I was already paid. Of course, this is the fraud. So I want to thank you.
Summarize your remarks.
Yeah. So thank you. My phone number is 646-434-8513. Thank you, and have a good day.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Theo Allen, followed by Rachel Foss. Theo?
Thank you, MTA Board, for having this interview and complying with the Public Authority's law to allow 30 minutes of public comment. My big concern with the public ridership is that with it being down 90% in the AM peak on Metro North, 2/3 on Long Island Railroad, and 50% on buses, 60% on the subways, the MTA is running full weekday service. Now, I get that ridership density that you usually have is greater than 100%, but some buses, I'm sure, may be overcrowded during this. Metro North certainly doesn't need 2 conductors and can have far less AM peak service. Long Island Railroad can probably do the same thing, so the MTA really needs to look at cutting service so that it can save PPEs and not do anything extraordinary to limit the ridership and limit how much it has to clean every single day to keep New York safe and stop the spread of this virus that we all want to see end. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Rachel Foss, followed by Christopher Grimes. Rachel?
Hello. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. My name is Rachel Foss. I'm the Senior Research Analyst for reInvent Albany. We advocate for more transparent and accountable government, including for state authorities like the MTA. First, we would like to thank the staff, board, and frontline workers of the MTA for their public service as the COVID-19 pandemic continues to hit New York. We know you are working long hours to protect New Yorkers by sanitizing and keeping the system running. The medical personnel and countless others continue to treat, protect, and keep supply chains open for New Yorkers. We also thank the MTA for piloting virtual public comment to try to uphold the spirit of public comment portion of the board meetings. Should meetings continue to be held virtually, we hope you will learn from this experience to improve public comment for future meetings, as well ensure that the spirit of the open meetings law is upheld. Perhaps most urgently, we and many other advocacy groups have joined the MTA in your call for at least $4 billion in initial emergency rescue funds from the federal government. In our joint letter to the New York congressional delegation from last week, we said that $4 billion is the minimum needed. As the crisis continues to unfold, the MTA will likely need even more to recover financially. The American Public Transit Association is now asking for $16 billion for the nation's public transit system. Given that the MTA has 38% of national ridership, the MTA's share would be $6 billion. This is why our groups are also asking the MTA to release timely and complete ridership and financial information in an open data format so the advocacy community and our elected representatives have the information necessary to fight for federal funds to save the MTA. This should include daily and weekly ridership and toll numbers compared to past years, and includes fare box and toll revenue losses. The MTA should also show those lost revenues from dedicated taxes, as well as projected losses, looking at best, medium, and worst case scenarios, given that this crisis is very fluid. With this information, we will be best able to work with you to secure desperately needed federal funds. Thank you again for your service.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Chris Greif, who will be followed by Deborah Greif.
I'm here. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Christopher D. Greif, member of the New York City Transit Riders Council member, as also the accessibility to the MTA, as well as Long Island Railroad ADA Task Force. One thing I do want to thank, how we trying to keep the trains and buses clean, but we do need to remind our bus drivers at this time that, you know, since you're entering the back of the bus, they need to make sure they come in all the way in the curve, because the issue is still going to be that short people can still, it's very hard for them to get in. Also, we need to make it very clear that walkers who can, it's hard for them to get on the bus. Even today, it's raining maybe, but some of them, you know, may still have to do what they have to do. Yes, they must stay home, but at the same time, we need to make it clear that walkers, wheelchairs still have that right, and still need to be more clearly information needs to go out to the community, because there are a lot of mix-up information going out there. Understand that right now we are supposed to stay home, stay healthy, but at the same time with these free testing sites, it will make that some bus areas like the Javits Center, hospitals, we need to make sure these things are, you know, we need to prepare for these at this time, indeed. I'd like to thank everyone. I like this video thing very much, and I do want to congratulate our Sarah, who's there. I know we'll be working with her very soon in the future, and we'll talk soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Deborah Greif, who will be followed by Jason Anthony.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can, thank you.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Deborah Greif. I am a person with disabilities as well as a parent, and I chair the Family Support Advisory Council in Brooklyn and a member of the Long Island Railroad ADA Task Force. My concern is I have been using a walker for a long time since I broke my left foot and ankle and sustained a mild concussion. If I have tendencies where I can fall, and that's why, you know, everyone thinks I walk great, I use the walker. Once the drivers don't pull, what Chris says is totally true. I have been asked to board the bus, and I'm talking about even before the corona, in the street, which I will not do because it's very dangerous, because if cars are going to come up, they could hit and run me down. Also, you have people of very short stature who are under 5 feet, and the back of the bus is not easy to get off. Before I broke my ankle, that was one of the hardest things to get on and off. Sad to say, the older buses were a little easier, only put steps that could even have used the lift. And also your policy for people with disabilities, you know, it's not everybody uses wheelchairs. What about the people who are visually impaired and they are blind and they have a seeing eye group? They need to make sure that their door is trained to go through the front. And also, I see where you have to change. So if the driver lets me on the front, because there's no way I'm going to be able to get on the back. I cannot lift the walker up to make that step, and I don't want to re-break the slip again. So, one, I need the help, and I would appreciate you being more clear with your information.
Our next speaker will be Jason Anthony, who will be followed by Andrew Pollitt.
Good afternoon from my comfortable home here in Brooklyn. I'm loving this feature a lot. This should be applied in case of emergency like this. But I want to say I've been seeing the changes regarding boarding on buses since this past Saturday. And some commuters weren't aware of these changes. So there has to be a more communicative way to communicate other commuters that uses buses regarding the board change. Those who don't have physical or any disability should board through the back. And those who have disability should board through the front. But having the driver being mindful. And another thing that I want to know is what happens if the bus gets crowded? Will the buses deploy, let's say, 2 at a time? So I want to know regarding this, and I want to give kudos to both Sarah Feinberg and Sarah Meyer. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. We will move to our next speaker, who is Lisa Daglian. Lisa, when you're ready.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. My name is Lisa Daglian. I'm the Executive Director of the Permanent Citizens Advisory Committee to the MTA. Thank you very much for this opportunity to provide testimony. These are extraordinary times, nothing like we've seen before, even through Sandy, even after 9/11. We commend the MTA leadership and every one of the men and women who are moving New York and ensuring that frontline workers can get where they need to go. Thank you. We salute you. We appreciate the governor's leadership in this challenging time and that of all of our elected officials who are hard at work ensuring that the MTA will get the resources it so desperately needs. Last week, Chairman Foss sent a letter to the New York delegation in Washington asking for at least $4 billion in emergency aid. We, along with 7 other advocacy organizations, sent a similar letter echoing our support for the MTA's request. But given what's happened just in the time between then and now, we believe there is far greater need than that. $4 billion was a snapshot in time. No one knows how long this will last, how many people and workers will be affected, and what extra cleaning measures will be needed. Now, even with the local bus rear door boarding, no fare will be collected, thus exacerbating the losses. We therefore call on our elected officials for at least double that $4 billion in order to keep the MTA ship righted now and into the future. Also calling on the MTA to increase transparency in what it is experiencing, the losses across all revenue streams, along with how the capital program will suffer or move forward. Please do not wait until next month's meeting to make this information available. Update it in real time. In addition, we ask for a pause in implementing the out-of-borough transit fund discount. Once this is over, there will be opportunity to figure out the details of how to implement the complex program. Right now, there are much bigger complex issues to tackle. Again, thank you for keeping New York moving. Please let us help you as you seek federal aid in this time of crisis. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Andrew Pollock.
Hey, there we go. Now anybody can see me?
I can. Thank you.
All right, let's start. Okay, hello everyone. Thank you all for letting me speak to you under this unfortunate circumstances. So a couple things. Number one, I want to apologize to President DiCarenzo for my comments last month regarding the Verrazano Bridge, and I'm glad that he clarified that I was wrong about the double tolling. It's going to be a split toll for the Verrazano. And I actually did the math, and turns out if it does go into effect, the current easy pass to go into Staten Island is $12.24. So if you do the math, 612 and 612 round trip between Brooklyn and Staten Island would be that price, of course. Second, I want to thank the MTA for delaying the Queens bus redesign until the COVID-19 pandemic does die down, of course, because right now it isn't really appropriate to have the meetings, and since everything was canceled, I'm glad John Liu I'm glad John Liu made sure that our voices will still be heard. And last thing I want to say to Larry Shorts, last month he noticed when I walked into 2 Broadway that I had a box of pizza with me. So, Larry, if you're watching, I'll treat you to lunch one day. So that's all I have to say. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Finley Stubbs.
I'm sorry, is this the Long Island Railroad thing?
So we're collecting comments for all of the MTA committees today. You have 2 minutes.
All right, cool. Can I do the Long Island Railroad one first?
Sure.
All right, cool. So, hello, board. I'd like to make a request that the Metro North runs within city limits only. So, you know, like the spread of the virus doesn't go like into upstate New York or just go right into Long Island or whatever. Or it doesn't go into Connecticut. It should run within Manhattan and the Bronx as well. The Long Island Railroad should run within city limits in Queens and Brooklyn and Manhattan.
I need to call you back. I'm not virtual meeting.
So thank you.
Okay.
Now
this is like a crisis.
New York City Transit Board. Hello, New York City Transit Board. I'd like to actually make a request that the transit police goes after the teams that were involved in that incident within earlier this month, breaking into the operating cab of a 7 train earlier this month. They should actually receive a ban because this kind of thing is really dangerous and we should just like prevent it. Like that's all there is to it. And I saw the mock-up of the new turnstile at J Street Metro Check. I really think that it will stop fare evasion because it's a problem. It's the same design as the London Underground turnstile, and it's a good design, and that will stop fare evasion. So just please use it. It's really needed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Our next speaker will be Omar Vera.
All right. 3, 2, 1. I'm in. All right. So, good morning, MTA board. I know today is a semi-unusual meeting here virtually because of the ongoing COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic happening worldwide. I just want to say thank you all for being here and for working very hard to help our first responders and to help everyone get back on track in this during this terrible outbreak. And I especially want to thank NYC Transit President Sarah Feinberg for her hard work in getting everyone back on track. Thank you, Sarah. And as for the rest of the board, and MTA staff, thanks for your hard work. And don't worry, we shall all be together back at MTA HQ soon enough once this health crisis subsides. And as for our usual transit advocates, keep doing what you're doing. Advocate for all of us. We shall overcome this crisis, and we shall be back at 2 Broadway soon enough, because we're all in this together. Thank you, and I shall see you all hopefully in April, or if not, soon enough. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Kimberly. This is Lucille from the MTA. I just want to remind you, since you are our public speaker, that in the interest of time and fairness, we're limiting everyone to 2 minutes. Please be aware that there will be a warning beep to remind you that you have 30 seconds to conclude your remarks. Thank you for your patience and understanding while we do this virtual public comment session. So you can begin when you're ready.
Hi, I just wanted to just give the voice of a nurse at NYU, done just to give my feedback on the ferry system. A lot of us use the ferry from Astoria, from wherever people are docked, and I just think that we've changed the times now so that we can't get to work in a proper amount of time in order for us to get to work, read about our patients, write all this information down. It would just be super helpful, especially for NYU employees, if we have ferries coming into 34th Street before our shifts, which are typically 6 p.m., 7 p.m., and 8 p.m. So in order for us to get to work on time, we'd have to be there, about 45 minutes early or something like that. But now at the new times, I'm going to be getting to work with maybe 15 minutes to spare. So I just think that maybe we need to allocate these times for healthcare workers as well.
Thank you so much, Kimberly.
No worries.
Our next speaker is Murray Bowden.
My name is Murray Bowden. I compliment Governor Cuomo for his leadership in making difficult decisions. He is doing the difficult things New Yorkers need to get past this. My wife and I learned to Zoom with our grandchildren, and that's a big plus for all of us. We stay connected. My comments. New York City Transit made the correct decision regarding collecting tickets on buses. That's leadership. That's how you do it. On the other hand, Metro North has closed the ticket offices on the Harlem corner. There's no reason to reopen them. Remove the ticket windows and make the space available to local businesses. The ticket windows were not part of the original building. Get rid of them. Let people use the space more productively. And we, the people who use the services of the MTA, appreciate the difficult work for all MTA employees. I, on behalf of my family, my grandchildren, and people I know in Westchester, we thank you all for the service you're providing in this very difficult time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Since we started, we've been joined by Commissioner Samuelson, Commissioner Brown, and Commissioner Lacewell, who was actually on from the beginning. So, Monica, please record that. I'm going to make some brief public comments before we get into the agenda for the meeting. Thank you for joining our virtual board meeting this morning. Clearly, this is an extraordinary time, and the MTA is doing some extraordinary things in response. First, by remaining laser focused on the safety of our employees and our customers, as we continue to keep the most essential of employees safely moving through New York. Our over 70,000 dedicated women and men have been working around the clock to keep our system safe for the heroic first responders and essential employees who still need to get to work and get home. Healthcare professionals, childcare, utility and transportation workers, including transit workers, police officers, firefighters, and other first responders. We owe them all a great debt of gratitude day in and day out. I also want to thank our agency presidents. First, Sarah Feinberg, who certainly has had an eventful first 3 weeks on the job, to say the least. Craig Cipriano, Kathy Rinaldi, Phil Eng, and Danny DiCrescenzo for their leadership during this time, as well as the rest of the senior leadership team. We also appreciate you all joining us virtually today so that we can heed recommended public health guidelines and maintain social distancing for the good of everyone's health and safety. First, a quick update on the coronavirus pandemic. The situation is rapidly changing with new information and guidance being issued regularly. We're working closely with our partners at the state, city, and federal levels to keep on top of it all. Every decision we make in managing this crisis has been driven by the advice of the CDC, the New York State Department of Health Commissioner Dr. Zucker and his colleagues, and his New York City Department of Health counterpart, Dr. Barbeau. I want to take a minute to talk about the immediate actions we've taken to protect our customers and employees. All our stations and frequent touch points are being disinfected twice daily, with our full fleet of rolling stock being disinfected on a 72-hour cycle, except for accessoride vehicles, which are disinfected daily. We're also disinfecting offices, stations, crew quarters, and other employee locations at least once a day, and making hand sanitizer available and reminding everyone of good hygiene habits. We've also taken steps to minimize contact and cash collections for our frontline employees, from implementing rear door boarding on buses, local buses, to minimizing the collection of cash on railroads and in stations. In order to protect vital, one-of-a-kind operations centers, we've deployed medical personnel to monitor the temperature of the staff in these facilities to prevent symptomatic individuals from possibly contaminating others within these centers. We've also initiated quick reaction teams that we can send to a location within the system where multiple employees are displaying symptoms. In the last few weeks, we've seen dramatic drops in ridership as New Yorkers heed the direction of the governor and the advice of medical experts and stay home. On the subways, there's been an 87% decline compared to the same time last year, falling by more than 60% on buses, 94% on Metro North, and 90% on the Long Island Railroad. Bridge and tunnel revenue, which subsidizes mass transit at the MTA, has declined 59% as of yesterday. This has two significant impacts for the agency, a financial one, which I'll speak more about in a moment, and impacts on service. As we announced yesterday, the MTA is moving to implement the Essential Service Plan, which was developed in close consultation with groups representing the heroic workers on the front lines of this pandemic, including hospitals, utility workers, and the city and state of New York. The MTA Essential Service Plan went into effect on the subways today and will be rolling out on buses, Metro North, and Long Island Railroad in the coming days. Across all of our services, we are monitoring ridership constantly and will make adjustments as needed. The complete MTA Essential Service Plan is available on our website, the My MTA app, and on countdown clocks in stations and on platforms. Reducing service is not ideal, but it's the right thing to do right now. That step will protect our workers on the front lines by giving us more flexibility in scheduling. Safety for our employees and our customers remains our #1 priority. Now for a moment on financial impacts. It's starkly clear that this pandemic is a national and international crisis. Entire American industries have come to a dead stop. Restaurants, hotels, commercial aviation, real estate development, and others. The MTA is no different. Every company and agency is currently suffering from a lack of liquidity. In the case of the MTA, this is driven by the fact that our fare box and toll revenue is about $8.5 billion in a normal year, about half of the operating budget needed to run the MTA. An unsold seat on a flight to Miami is revenue that is lost forever. The same is true of an unused seat on an MTA subway, bus, or commuter rail. Once the plane leaves the gate, or a subway customer or a bus customer doesn't ride that day because of the pandemic, that's lost revenue will never recover. We expect the full impact of the crisis from the plummeting fare and toll revenues to be over $4 billion by the end of the year. That's an annualized number, assuming that continues for that period. As we're seeing dramatic drops in transit ridership, we're also seeing significant declines in vehicle crossings at our bridges and tunnels, where toll revenue traditionally served as a boost to MTA finances and subsidized mass transit. This drop is on top of sizable losses on more than $6 billion in state and local taxes dedicated to the MTA. That is surely likely to decline in the inevitable downturn. Additionally, we expect the aggressive disinfecting efforts undertaken to protect our customers and employees to total over $300 million on an annualized basis, assuming it continues for that period. We are taking immediate actions to mitigate this situation. In addition to drawing down $1 billion on our existing line of credit, we have implemented tight cost controls on capital and operating spend, and are laser focused on only essential activities as we manage through this crisis. This includes an immediate temporary stop to any new capital commitments until we have a more permanent solution to the liquidity issues precipitated by the pandemic. We're also taking a close and focused look at what is coming to the board each month for approval, starting with this month when we shorten the action items to those that were absolutely essential. We're also working with our state partners for legislative changes to preserve flexibility and help manage our operating cash flow. Thanks to these immediate steps, our Chief Financial Officer, Bob Foran, estimates the agency's liquidity to be approximately $3.5 billion by the end of March. That may sound like a large amount, but I note that it costs more than $300 million each week to operate the MTA. But given the dramatic drop in ridership and revenue, and the fact that this health crisis means ridership will continue to be depressed in the months to come, The only realistic solution is a substantial federal funding commitment. The scale of the operating budget deficits the MTA and other agencies face is unprecedented, and this is an extraordinary time calling for extraordinary measures. We have called on Congress for a national solution to a national crisis, together with a coalition of transit agencies across the nation. In New York, without at least $4 billion of federal grant funding, the MTA will be unable to pay its obligations, including making payroll for a critical workforce of approximately 70,000 employees that is working hard on the front lines of this crisis, a workforce that has already kept New York moving after 9/11, Superstorm Sandy, and countless other disasters. Scaling back service won't be enough. The $2.8 billion in savings we've already committed to achieving through our budget reduction program and transformation efficiencies won't be enough. And allowing critical state of good repair investments we've fought long and hard for to be gutted in favor of operational costs is a non-starter. Such a huge blow would come at a time when we have achieved tremendous progress across the system. Subways, buses, and commuter rails alike, on-time performance has achieved sustained improvement, and ridership has been steadily growing, defying national trends. Our New York congressional delegation has been fighting hard as our champion in Washington, as they did after Superstorm Sandy and 9/11, and we thank them for it. Early this morning, the administration and Congress reached a deal on a $2 trillion relief package. This morning, in a letter, Senator Schumer confirmed that the relief package includes the $25 billion requested by public transit agencies across the nation, including $4 billion dedicated to the MTA. That's, of course, subject to the President signing the bill. We applaud Speaker Pelosi, Senator Schumer, and Representatives Nita Lowey, Peter King, Carolyn Maloney, Sean Patrick Maloney, Jerry Nadler, Lee Zeldin, and others. Now we're calling on Congress to send the bill to the President for signature. As Senator Schumer said this morning, passage of the bill is not cause for celebration, but rather done out of necessity. We also thank our labor partners for standing with us in advocacy with respect to the $4 billion. Including John Samuelson and Tony Utano of the TWU, Anthony Simon and the other Long Island Railroad labor leaders, and Matt Mitchell, Ed Valenti, and Bill DiCarlo, and the other labor leaders at Metro-North. This funding is critical, not only to ensure that we can continue to operate through the crisis, but also serve as the catalyst for economic growth once the pandemic subsides and the country's pulse begins beating again. I also want to be clear that the full impact of this pandemic is still unknown. We're only 3 weeks into it, 3+ weeks. We've planned for disruptions in the past, but never on this scale or scope. We need $4 billion, but we're only at the starting point of this crisis. We will need substantially more than that to survive. We're the lifeblood of the New York economy. The state can't recover without a strong public transportation system. It's imperative that we pick up where we left off in improving the system, resuming growth once we move past this crisis. Approval of the minutes. The minutes of February's meeting have been distributed to all members. Are there any corrections or omissions? If not, may I have a motion to approve the minutes? I move it. Second?
Second.
Larry, you second it? Thank you all. Thank you all. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
The minutes are approved. Thank you. I'm now going to turn the floor over to Bob Forian, our Chief Financial Officer, for a report. Bob.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dramatic declines in MTA's public transportation system ridership and fare revenues and MTA bridge and tunnel crossing traffic and toll revenues have occurred at an accelerating rate. Based upon preliminary revenue data from last Friday through yesterday, the current weekly revenue loss for MTA and TBTA as against the February plan projections is estimated to be $125 million. And if extrapolated out for a full fiscal year at the current level of ridership and traffic loss, could result in an estimated MTA-wide revenue loss in excess of $6.5 billion. While we cannot estimate the duration of the pandemic and the reduced use of MTA services, if the current levels are sustained for 6 months, and then followed by a gradual 6-month return to pre-pandemic ridership and traffic levels, the estimated revenue loss could reach $4.9 billion. There's no assurance that such level of ridership and traffic decline will not deteriorate further, or on the positive side, that the COVID-19 emergency will not subside and ridership and traffic improves differently than this assumption. As provided in the February plan, MTA relies upon approximately $6.4 billion in state and local subsidies and dedicated taxes. The financial stress which MTA is experiencing as a result of the pandemic is being similarly felt at all levels of government and in the social and financial lives of MTA patrons and the state and local residents. This can be expected to have an adverse impact on state and local revenues, on dedicated tax collections, and thus on the capacity of the state and local governments to maintain or raise the level of financial support to MTA during this crisis. The impacts of the pandemic on MTA's financial condition are clearly severe and, as noted, may deteriorate further. We're going to address this financial emergency in 2 stages, namely, first assuring short and intermediate term liquidity needs of the MTA and its operating entities, and secondly, longer term or permanent solutions, bearing in mind that the reductions in current and projected revenues will not be made up in terms of cash impact, even if intermediate or long-term ridership and traffic are fully restored to pre-crisis levels. MTA currently has liquidity resources in the approximate amount of $3.75 billion, consisting of current running cash balance of $1.24 billion, internally available flexible funds of $1.19 billion, OPEB resources of $320 million, and in-place commercial bank lines of credit totaling $1 billion, which, as was mentioned by the chair, were fully drawn last Friday. These funds provide a temporary bridge to a permanent solution to the lost revenues and higher expenses. They must be repaid or replaced. Use of these monies will leave MTA with a significant gap in funding for both the operating budget and capital plan over the longer term, and will likely result in additional debt issuance and unfunded operating needs. At least $4 billion in federal emergency funding is certainly a critical element to the solution. But other long-term items would not be limited, but would also perhaps include replacing programmed pay-as-you-go capital funds up to $1.64 billion with long-term bonding, and various restructuring debt options generating potential resources of over $1.79 billion, depending on both market conditions and other matters. These options would come at a cost, including increased longer-term borrowing and potential adverse impacts on the timing of MTA initiatives to improve its system. The degree of the impacts to MTA and its related entities' operations and finances are extremely difficult to predict due to the dynamic nature of the outbreak, including uncertainties relating to its duration, severity, and ultimate geographic spread, as well as with regard to what actions may be taken by other governmental authorities and healthcare providers to contain or mitigate its impact. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my comments.
Bob, thank you. Any questions from board members for Bob? All right, great. Now, yeah, got it. Next, let's hear from Kathy Rinaldi, please.
Good morning, members of the board. Before I start my report this morning, I would like to thank the workforce of Metro North for everything that they have done over the course of the last several weeks. They're coming to work every day. They're bringing healthcare workers and other first responders to their jobs as they help to fight the pandemic. And I couldn't be more appreciative and more thankful for everything that they've been doing to keep our community safe. Thank you all very, very much. During this difficult and unprecedented time, a top priority of Metro North is keeping our customers and employees safe, and we are taking all measures possible to prevent the spread of COVID-19. This is why we continue to disinfect our stations twice a day, sanitize our trains daily, and perform a complete cleaning of our trains on a 72-hour cycle. We are also regularly cleaning and disinfecting our employee facilities, and we remain focused on making working conditions as safe as we possibly can. As we continue to provide essential train service for healthcare workers and first responders and others, I appreciate the close coordination and collaboration we have from across our MTA family, our labor leaders, and our communities that we serve as we all work together to combat COVID-19 during these uncertain times. As the chairman has already reported, ridership has dropped precipitously on Metro North from March 4th, 2020 through today. As of last Friday, we were down more than 90% overall compared to the weeks before the pandemic. These declines were led by the New Haven line, given the high percentage of customers in the finance industry who were able to work from home earlier than others. This was followed by the Harlem line, and lastly, the Hudson line, which has a higher percentage of service workers and people in healthcare than the other two lines. West of Hudson service is also showing an approximately 90% drop in ridership. At this point, with only about 10% of our customers remaining, those continuing to ride are essential or mostly essential workers. I'd next like to give a brief report on PTC Progress. We do have some good news to report there. As of Saturday, March 14th, Metro North extended PTC to Grand Central Terminal, completing installation of PTC on the Harlem and Hudson lines. PTC coverage includes all trains along the Hudson line 74 miles from GCT to Poughkeepsie, including Amtrak and CSX freight trains, and the Harlem line's 82 miles from GCT to Wassaic. Crews simultaneously completed activating PTC wayside equipment on the 8 miles of the New Canaan branch in Connecticut. The activation of PTC along the entire Harlem and Hudson lines, as well as the New Canaan branch, demonstrates our swift and steady progress to meet our goal of full implementation by the end of 2020. Thanks to everyone's commitment in implementing PTC, we now have 68% of our route miles in full PTC mode, and we're fully committed on completing PTC installation on the remaining 62 miles of the New Haven main line to ensure the safety of our system. Now, just a few words on service delivery in the month of February. Our on-time performance climbed to 97.2%, which was made it our best February in 7 years. By line, the Hudson line operated at 98.2%, with 98.1% in the peak. The Harlem line was at 96.7% with 95.1% in the peak. The New Haven line was at 97.1 with 97.2% during the peak. We could not perform at this level without the dedication and commitment of our workforce, who rise to the challenge every single day. And again, in closing, as I began, I would like to thank everyone at Metro North for their efforts during these very challenging and frightening times. Public transportation is the lifeblood of our region in good times and is absolutely indispensable in times like these. I'm proud to lead Metro North, and I'm so proud of my colleagues. And I want to thank them all to be safe. There's one competitive procurement this month for approval in a not-to-exceed amount of $2 million. It's a contract modification to an existing miscellaneous service contract with the firm Clearaway Industries. The modification is for ongoing scheduled brush and tree cutting services for Metro North's Harlem and Hudson lines, as well as emergency services to remove tree and brush that are deemed dangerous, damaged, or that have fallen throughout Metro North's entire territory. I submit this procurement item to the board for its approval.
Thank you, Kathy. I'll make the motion to approve this procurement. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? Thank you. The procurement carries. Phil, please, Long Island Railroad report.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. These are unprecedented times, but working together, we will get through this. To the public and all the first responders, healthcare workers, food service workers, transportation workers, including many of our own, that are out helping to battle this pandemic and save lives, you have my assurance that the Long Island Railroad workforce is taking extraordinary measures to do our part to flatten the curve and combat the spread of COVID-19. That is why our essential service plan, starting Friday, March 27, has been developed based on field observations of travel patterns over the last few weeks in order to accommodate our current ridership levels. The schedule will be available shortly and will protect the ability to practice social distancing throughout the day on the railroad. We will be monitoring ridership during the initial phases of the new service plan and be prepared to modify on the fly with additional trains that are pre-positioned in our yards. This is only possible due to the dedication and courage of our employees, both frontline and those behind the scenes, as well as the leadership and support from our labor partners, whose contributions have been instrumental. Together, we are rising to this challenge as we battle this pandemic, ensuring that essential employees can continue to depend on us. Together with our sister agencies, we are doing our part to provide essential services and protect New Yorkers. With regard to essential projects, one of them is positive train control. While our system integrator and their vendors are facing the same challenges as all of us, we all remain committed and on target to hit the December 2020 deadline. We recently hit a significant milestone, running another 108 miles from Ronkonkoma to Greenport and from Patchogue to Montauk, placing these sections into extended revenue service demonstration, bringing us to 72% of our 305 total route miles. We're also making progress with Amtrak and the FRA regarding Amtrak's proposed alternative solutions in Harold interlocking and their back-to-back software for their trains to be interoperable as they operate through Harold. There is more information in the book. And as for our monthly reports, I'm pleased to say that our on-time performance for February was 94.3%, best February since 2012. This was 2.2% better than last year. Additionally, our ridership growth continued prior to COVID-19 in February, and we're proud as we work to get through this crisis. We're planning to be ready to support the future. One last report, our 2019 annual satisfaction survey is also in the book, and there's more detail available in there. But overall, we're seeing that our customers are acknowledging and experiencing the efforts of our workforce and the positive changes that we were making prior to COVID-19. I want the public to know that with each of us doing our parts, we will get through this together. Thank you to the public who can stay home and who are doing so. Thank you to all the essential workers across the island and New York, including our own represented labor workforce and management. Not only are they dealing with the pressures of the job, but with immense uncertainty at home and in the world, their professionalism never ceases to amaze me. Their safety and that of our customers will always be our preeminent concern. To our labor partners, their commitment, their communication, and support has been key in helping to keep the Long Island Railroad running. I wish all who have been affected with the COVID-19 at Long Island Railroad MTA a speedy recovery. And to the board and to the public, the Long Island Railroad is here for you, and thank you very much.
Any questions for Phil? All right, thank you, Phil. Sarah, a report on transit, please.
Thank you. Good morning. So a couple things. First, we have been hearing a lot of numbers every day from the governor, from the mayor, from the president, from the CDC. And the latest number that we heard yesterday was 52 confirmed positives at MTA. And, I don't want us to miss the forest for the trees. These are our colleagues, and our thoughts are with them and with their families, and we wish them well. And, some of them are struggling with mild versions of this virus, and some of them are extremely ill. And so we are thinking about them all the time, and they are in our thoughts, and we are praying for them, and we're sending them good wishes, and we are looking forward to welcoming them back to work. So many have said it. I just want to add my voice to it. In addition to the 52, of course, there's 74,000 workers who are showing up every day. Some of them are teleworking for New York City Transit. We have thousands on telework and tens of thousands who are showing up every day, operating a safe and efficient system for those essential workers who need to get to where they're going to take care of those who are impacted by this virus. And to serve those of us who are, trying to get through our daily lives, the grocery store workers, the delivery folks who are all showing up every day. So we are incredibly grateful to them, and it's truly been an honor to be a part of a workforce of heroes. It has been, Mr. Chairman, you noted a tough couple of weeks, a trying couple of weeks. It's hard to believe it's only been weeks. It feels like it's been a lot longer than that. And from the moment I started, which was early, we have been working on our response to this crisis 24/7. And I have been utterly impressed by the workforce and the colleagues that I'm working with every day. I hope that they've been impressed with themselves. I think we've all managed to pull things off that we never would have imagined we could. Just a couple of examples, in a matter of hours, we went from disinfecting stations once a day to disinfecting touch points of stations twice a day. We've seen unbelievable work from those cleaners and from everyone who's working on that. In a matter of hours, we were able to turn thousands of people onto telework, which is not part of our culture necessarily at New York City Transit. You know, we have people who commute into work and work and then commute home, and so that was not as easy as it might have been in many workplaces to just flip a switch, and thousands of people in a matter of hours became telework able. You know, our subway team has done unbelievable planning. We have planned for all kinds of variations, which is not just sort of back of the envelope planning. It takes tremendous work and resources to plan for the kinds of ridership that we expect to see, but maintaining our ability to move essential workers, and think through all of the different variations of what may happen in the coming days, weeks, and months. And that work has been precise and impressive and quick and efficient, and it's been amazing to watch it. You know, we in a matter of hours also turned on rear door boarding, you know, which again took a massive cooperation from both our team and from our partners, our union partners, and it's the right thing to do to make sure that we're doing everything we can to protect our operators. So those are just a couple of examples of some of what we've seen. You know, when I took this job, I talked about the daily miracle that unfolds in New York City every day as millions and millions of people leave their house and enter our system and either climb on a subway or climb on a bus and go to work and then get home safely at night. And this has been a different kind of miracle unfolding, but it has certainly been an honor to be a part of it. I do think that we're starting to hit a turning point in this crisis, certainly not in terms of the spread of the illness. We've heard the governor and others tell us that it is going to get worse before it gets better, so I'm not pretending to be a medical expert here, but when I say a turning point, I think we are at a point where we have made some changes to service. We will continue to right-size service. Our efforts here are not to continue to decrease service to save funds or to you know, maximize efficiency. It is to make sure that we are able to move the essential workers that need to be moved in a safe and efficient way, while also making sure that we are doing the right thing by our own workforce and sending as many people home as possible. And I think we made this decision at the right moment. I think we executed it well. I want people to know that we are taking a really close look at any kind of potential crowding issues we can have. We are going to be addressing those as close to in real time as possible. It's going to take a couple days to get it right, because we need, the priority has to be to move folks who need to be moved, but the other priority has to be that to hit the right amount of service where we can send people home so we are not overcrowding crew rooms and restrooms and break rooms. You know, if we do this right, we can serve every single person who needs to move across the city. We can do it safely and efficiently, and we can send a lot of people home to make sure that we're protecting them as well. I've been a broken record on this. I'm desperate to send people home, because if they're home and they're teleworking, or if they're home waiting for their shift to start, or if they're home off for a couple days before their next shift next week, we're going to keep more people healthy and we're going to stem the spread of the disease. So there are a lot of updates across the board. I think, Chair, you've done a great job, and the rest of the MTA leadership has done a great job of keeping the board apprised of things, of keeping the media updated, and of keeping the public aware of what we're doing. So I won't take time now to update on every single metric and every change that's happened. I will, of course, take any questions, but I think most people are familiar with them. But I would just close by thanking the workforce again. It's been an honor to work with this team, and we have a long way to go, but we're getting through it. Thank you. Yes, and then I will move on to my procurement.
Great.
The Transit Committee has one action for board approval. The item for approval is a modification to a contract with Siemens Mobility for $14 million for continued system software support and enhancement for the public address customer information system. I submit this item to the board for their approval.
Thank you, Sarah. I make a motion to approve the procurement. Do I have a second?
Second. Rhonda.
Thank you, Rhonda. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed or any abstentions? Thank you. Next, Janelle Lieber is here virtually to give us a brief update from C&D.
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, Board. We at Construction Development are moving forward, and we're moving forward in a slightly different and safer manner. But we are moving forward on a number of active construction projects. The first thing we did, and we continue to do, is to take precautionary measures to make sure that all of our employees and consultants and contractors are safe. 90%, approximately 90% of the 2,000 construction and development staff are telecommuting. In addition, we instituted a 24/7 hotline for our contractors and consultants, and that's received many calls, and we are, with the use of flow charts and medically improved, public health approved information, advising our contractors and consultants on how to react to the public health issues and reports that they are receiving. The projects that have continued, we have scaled down some projects, but we have continued many projects, consistent with the determination in the executive order that transportation infrastructure was categorized as essential. The projects that we've continued are being done in a different manner. They have been re-examined logistically and otherwise to make sure that separation is maintained on the sites. There's no sharing of tools. Hangs are being kept separate so that there's no interaction, and spaces are being evaluated and deployments are being analyzed so that social distance can be maintained. In addition, over a week ago, we developed an app so that projects could report both their COVID-related health information and impacts, and also to report on their status. And now we're receiving roughly 225 project reports daily through the app. In addition, we are managing a range of supply chain issues, elevator and escalators becoming unavailable, or deliveries not being possible to be made because of the public health crisis. But so far, we are managing those reasonably well. We have approximately 6 projects at this point that have been closed down for public health reasons because of positives being identified or otherwise. And we have we've accomplished responsive cleaning of approximately 10 projects, which we've been able to deploy very quickly when public health information called for it. So I would say we are also planning and executing on scaling down some of the work in recognition of the fact that both the contractor workforce and our own MTA workforce is likely to experience issues of availability to the public health condition that we're all focused on. So that is my report, broadly speaking. I would note that on the agenda originally, I had a modification, a retroactive modification for the acceleration, an elevator project after consultation with the chairman and the CFO. We've elected to hold that back, consistent with the reality that we have to re-examine our financial position. That concludes my report. And I just wanted to acknowledge before I finish, not only the extraordinary efforts of the MTA staff and consultants, but also the collaboration that we've had with the trade associations and labor. I've spoken to each of the major trade associations and to Gary LaBarbera in the last 24 hours, and we really collaborated well to make sure that the work that can and is going forward is done in the most safe manner. Thank you.
Jano, thanks for the report. Any questions for Jano?
Yes, I have one. It's Andrew, Jano. Does this now impact the completion of the Canarsie 2 work? Do we know if that's going to be still end of April or thereabouts?
I anticipate that will be completed. We had a successful weekend, although this was a major logistics reorganization for safety purposes on that. But we did have a successful weekend of work on a double track outage this past weekend, and so we are anticipating completion of the tunnel portion of the work in April.
Terrific. Thank you so much.
All right, great. Let's hear from Bridges and Tunnels. Danny, please.
Environment. Your tireless efforts to keep our bridges and tunnels open and safe are helping the region to respond to the coronavirus health crisis. Thank you for your hard work and your dedication. The safety of our employees and their families is top priority at Bridges and Tunnels. I also like to thank Pat Foy, Mario Peliquin, Pat Warren, Paul Famar, my fellow agency presidents, my staff, and others too numerous to mention for their leadership, guidance, and support during this unprecedented time. All MTA Bridges Tunnel employees are working hard to provide our critical services while minimizing health risks to our workforce and customers. I also wish our employees and our employees that may be impacted by this virus, or their family members, for speedy recovery, and for all to stay well. I'm submitting 2 competitive solicited procurements for the board approval today. The first to award 4 competitively solicited personal service contracts to 4 firms for biannual bridge inspections that are mandated by state and federal standards to ensure the structural integrity and public safety of our bridge structures. These contracts total $10.7 million. The second is for an as-needed contract to provide electrical services at authority facilities by competitive work orders in the amount of $30 million. No funds are being expended at this time.
I make a motion to approve these 2 procurements. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Thank you. The procurements carry. Danny, back to you.
Thank you. I would now like to ask my Senior Vice President and General Counsel, Peg Perry, to walk you through a series of actions that will enable B&T to implement split tolling at the Verrazano Narrows Bridge in accordance with federal law. Peg?
Good morning. There are 2 action items for board approval to implement split tolling to comply with the recent federal law that eliminated one-way tolling at the Verrazano and directed that tolls be collected in the Staten Island bound and Brooklyn bound directions. We expect to implement split tolling by the end of 2020. First, we're asking you to approve and adopt the Type 2 determination of no significance for split tolling.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the Type 2 determination and determination of no significance for split tolling. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Thank you. The motion carries.
We're also asking you to approve the change in the method of toll collection to split tolling at the Verrazano and the corresponding changes in the toll schedule regulations.
Thanks, Peg. I'll make the motion to approve these changes to the method of toll collection and the toll schedule regulation. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed or abstentions? Thank you. The motion carries.
There are another 2 action items for board approval to change the MTA's VNB rebate programs to accommodate split tolling. First, we're asking you to approve and adopt the negative declaration for the changes to the rebate programs.
Before I make a motion to approve and adopt the negative declaration, I just want to make the following observation, which is that we expect that split tolling will generate an incremental $10 million in revenue for the MTA on an annual basis. I make a motion to approve and adopt the negative declaration. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed or abstentions? The procurement carries.
We're also asking you to approve the changes to the rebate program that will go into effect with the implementation of split tolling by the end of 2020.
I'll make a motion to approve the rebate programs. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed or abstentions? The motion carries. I'll call on Pat McCoy with respect to the Finance Committee, please.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Board. There's a staff summary on page 43 of the board book, followed by a one-page resolution that seeks board authorization to immediately increase our ability to issue taxable revenue anticipation notes, or RANs, from the currently authorized level of $1 billion up to a maximum amount of $3 billion. We believe this is a fiscally prudent action to provide the MTA with necessary increased liquidity to meet working capital needs during this COVID-19 crisis. The original resolution was approved by the board in July of 2013, and we have periodically increased the amount of the facility. Our statutory authority to issue the RANs provides for a maximum duration of 18 months for a note issue, and notes may be periodically rolled for a maximum outstanding period of 5 years. As we describe in the staff summary, we currently have agreements with JPMorgan Chase Bank for $800 million and Bank of America NA for $200 million. We drew both of these facilities down in their entirety on March 20th. Bank of America has already agreed to increase its facility up to $410 million, and we remain in discussions with JP Morgan for an increase of their facility. Given the increase we're seeking here, we are also reaching out to several other large commercial banks to request their interest in pricing so that we can assemble a diversified lending exposure and to achieve as much as the full amount as authorized. And I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Any questions for Pat?
This is David Jones, and I'm concerned, obviously. We had projections of what the debt service would look like before this whole disaster. I'll vote for this, but I'd like to get some projections as they come in on exactly what the debt service load is likely to be as we go forward. I will definitely vote for the motion now.
Commissioner Jones, we will get you that information. I'll note that we're 3 weeks into this crisis. It is still evolving. The situation with respect to transit revenue is likely to continue to be depressed across the country, including in New York. And obviously, as I mentioned in my comments, the $6 billion of subsidies, that is a very important part of our revenue every year, is undoubtedly will decline. By how much, it remains to be determined. But your question is a fair one, and we'll respond to it. I'll make a motion to approve this. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed or abstentions? The action items carry. Thank you very much. Next up is Josiane Codillo to introduce the all-agency investment guideline limits.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and the board. The Treasury Department is making a staff survey to request approval to increase the investment limit in any one bank or corporation from $250 million to $500 million. With the current decline in the market because of the coronavirus pandemic, we have very few available investment options. The Treasury bills market, which is currently negative. Therefore, we need to adjust our investment strategy while following the investment guidelines. The increase would provide us with greater flexibility while maintaining the required liquidity.
Josiane, thank you.
Asking the board for approval.
Thank you. Questions for Josiane? I'll make, sorry?
It's Linda Lacewell. Could we get a recap? I had trouble hearing that.
Yeah, please, Bob.
Yes. The Treasury Department is submitting a staff summary to request approval to increase the investment limit in any one bank or corporation from $250 million to $500 million. With the current decline in the market because of the coronavirus pandemic, we have very few available investment options. The Treasury bills market rate is currently negative. Therefore, we need to adjust our investment strategies while following the guidelines. The increase will provide us with greater flexibility while maintaining the required liquidity.
Bob, just to be clear, it's not a change in investment policy. It's an increase in the amount of business we can do with any one firm.
That's right.
Okay, got it. Any other questions?
Yeah, Pat, it's Linda again.
Yes, Linda.
As the Superintendent DFS, I'm just going to recuse myself from this discussion.
Linda, I understand. I'll make a motion to approve this action. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? Thank you. And any abstentions in addition to Commissioner Lacewell? Thank you. The motion is approved. Monica, you'll note Commissioner Lacewell's. Before David Ross, that action is approved. Before David Ross introduces the headquarters procurements, a moment on the transformation RFP, which is before the board for approval today. And I want to be clear on 3 points. Anthony McCord at first and his team continue to work on transformation, but on a different timeline. The situation, of course, is dynamic, and we're solely focused at this time in employee and customer health and having sufficient numbers of employees to run the system. Transformation will proceed on a timeline that prioritizes getting through the pandemic and the liquidity crisis that it has started. And nothing will be implemented in terms of putting consultants to work or taking other actions until the crisis is past us. Second is we've no plans to lay off any employee as a result of this pandemic. Frankly, we need everyone's help to keep our system moving. Third, approval of the RFP today does not mean that transformation begins tomorrow. Anthony and David will speak more about this in a moment, but we will not be moving forward on implementing this contract until the public health crisis is over. And now I'll turn it over to Anthony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We seek board approval to award competitively procured specialist consulting services from Argo, Ernst & Young, BCG, and HNTB to help deliver the transformation plan as recommended by Alex Partners and as adopted by the board in 2019. Given the current public health crisis, we have secured exceptional reductions in price to ensure the financial health of the MTA. David Ross, who led negotiations for the MTA, will provide additional details in a minute. We will also delay the start, as Chairman Foy said, of these contracted services until the pandemic is over. Additionally, we have negotiated the right to do two things: to pause the contract for up to 3 additional months and to terminate the contract early as a direct or indirect result of the COVID-19 crisis. It is more important than ever that we adopt best-in-class practices to make the MTA more efficient and more effective in good times and in bad, to support our workers and all those other essential workers who rely on the MTA to do their essential activities every day. Indeed, the transformation's focus in this time of crisis is to make sure that the back office processes, pay, purchasing, IT services, warehousing, etc., are operationally efficient, effective, and resilient, given that non-essential employees are now working remotely and there's a possibility of widespread employee absences due to COVID-19. We will also focus on continuous improvement opportunities that do not impact on resource levels and do not require any additional cash or capital outlay to be put in place. I now turn to David, who will provide additional detail on this critical procurement. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Anthony. So first, MTA headquarters has a total of 10 procurement actions totaling $108,202,000. There are 2 non-competitive actions totaling $12,903,869. They're modifications to contracts with preferred source vendor, New York State Industries for the Disabled, and they'll continue providing janitorial and window cleaning services to New York City Transit and Long Island Railroad. There are 8 competitive actions totaling $95,298,131. The first is an award to TrueView BSI totaling $4,255,883 for employee background verifications and related investigative services. The next 6 actions, the result of the competitive request for proposals to implement MTA's transformation plan. Contract awards will be made in 4 categories of services, 3 of which are included for consideration by the board today. Before speaking about them individually, I'll note that we were able to delay or even cancel work on any and all of them for reasons that include matters relating to COVID-19. So we have a great deal of flexibility with regard to the implementation of these contracts. The first of them will establish a panel of 4 contractors, and the award of specific tasks will be subject to mini RFPs. The recommended awardees are Argo Incorporated, Ernst & Young, HNTB New York Engineering and Architecture, and the Boston Consulting Group. This category covers central engineering, construction and development, safety, health and environment and operating standards, and service design functions. The total aggregate budget is $18 million, but the contracts are $0 contracts, and work will be issued competitively as work assignments are planned. The second recommendation is for Ernst & Young for $64,941,800. This category covers transformation-related services including support functions, finance, procurement, human resources, training, labor relations, legal and compliance, diversity, and EEO. This category also tasks Ernst & Young with providing advisory support to MTA agencies and centralized IT transformation services. The final transformation category award recommendation for today is with Alexander Proudfoot Company for $5,100,448. This third category award covers police and security functions. The final category covers marketing and communications, but that is not in the board package this month. A few notes on the package in general for everyone. First off, these were highly competitive procurements. The support category, which is the largest dollar amount that's going to Ernst & Young, just for example, we had 7 vendors that provided proposals to us, and there were 3 vendors that were viewed in the competitive range through which we engaged in extensive negotiations. We had a selection committee of 6 people that were involved in the evaluation of proposals in that category, and we had 18 individuals providing technical support, technical advice to the selection committee, and they represented 8 different disciplines. So for that category, and in fact for all of the categories, we had a broad range of competition. 13 vendors submitting in the engineering and construction category, and 4 vendors in the safety and in the police and security category. So again, broad competition, a broad range of people representing the entirety of the MTA, evaluating the proposals, and technical advisors in support of them. So I think this was an entirely thorough process, and we reached very, very good results. Finally, as Anthony mentioned in his presentation, we actually made award determinations just before the COVID-19 crisis struck. And realizing that the world had changed quite substantially, we went back to all of the vendors that were recommended for award and sought additional reductions off of what were already highly competitive prices that were already the subject of extensive negotiations with these vendors. The minimal reduction, the smallest reduction received from any of them, and includes 3 vendors in the engineering construction category, were 10%. Argo, which was higher priced than some of the others to begin with in that particular category, offered us 15% reductions off their prices. In construction and demolition, Ernst & Young in the support functions category, again, the largest one of them, offered us what came to about a 10.6% reduction in their prices, a minimum 10% reduction in all mandatory costs, and a 20% reduction in the other costs of their program. It should come to about 10.6%, maybe more than that ultimately in savings on the contract if we end up doing more. And lastly, in the security and police category, we got a 11.5% commitment in reduction from Proudfoot. So substantial reductions off of the competitively negotiated prices for those contracts to begin with. Continuing, the last action proposed is a 9-month extension of a contract with Corvell Healthcare for medical bill review services to support MTA workers' compensation program totaling $3 million. There are no ratifications proposed this month. I note that the board materials include a prompt payment annual report and the all-agency procurement report. And I'm also pleased to just mention that within the BSC, the vast majority of employees are telecommuting successfully, and the few that have not been able to get connectivity or for whatever reasons technically are not able to telecommute just yet, we're working on getting them online as well. So the BSC is a fully operational operation right now for the MTA. Thank you.
David, thank you. Any questions for David or Anthony on these proposed procurements?
Yeah, hi, Neil Zuckerman. Pat, I'd like to recuse myself from, I believe, items 2, 3, and 4, according to the list that has been provided, as I've done in private settings that involve general management consulting.
Neil, duly noted. I'll also note that you recused yourself, left the room, or left the conference call when these were discussed in board briefings. So duly noted. Do I have a motion to approve the...
Second.
Pat, can I make a couple of Bob Lynn?
Sure, Bob.
Guys, make a couple of general comments?
Yes.
Okay, so first of all, I want to thank everybody for this extraordinarily concise and important presentations made today. And I'm going to be voting in favor of the transformation proposals. But I want to say this, that each day we wake up and we listen and we go to bed through interviews and conversations and thoughts that were once the exclusive province of Hollywood and Netflix, and now it's part of our everyday life. And as many experts warn, the worst is yet to come. But as always in the country, and especially in New York City, with great crises, great people have risen to the occasion. And I note today Joe Biden describing the governor, Andrew Cuomo, as providing a lesson in leadership. And I'd like to say, Pat, I think the same thing is true with all that you have done. And there's been extraordinary leadership. And I want to also salute the amazing workers, the union leadership, and of course the healthcare community. It's been extraordinary what people have done. And as many people have warned that there needs to be a national lockdown, I think as a board, we have an obligation to understand the magnitude, and I do appreciate the comments that Bob Ferran made that talked about the impact on ridership, fares, taxes, toll revenues, prices, fees, the critical unknowns. So I'd just like to suggest, in conjunction with this meeting, which I think was a tremendously stripped down and directed set of things that we talked about, that we need to continue to model the scenarios that Bob talked about, and to see the type of information that David Jones also talked about what are the impacts on all the various issues we've been speaking about. I think in the short run, everyone has been talking, both city and state, about the need to look for savings. And it seems to me the new schedules ought to provide significant savings, probably in projected overtime. I'm sure that we're not going to be doing the type of hiring that we might have otherwise done. And I would heartily recommend a labor management committee
to immediately talk about where we can find savings and what's the type of work that labor and management can do together at this time. Third, I wonder whether, and I'm hearing Janet speak, I wonder whether or not the new schedules provide opportunity to rethink of how we're going to do our capital work and whether there are things that could safely be done in terms of maintenance and repairs now in light of the new schedules that might be well worth thinking about. And fourth, as others have mentioned, that we need to be circumspect with all of the contracting going forward. The market has changed nationally, locally, and we need to consider that with each of the contracts we look at. So I'm happy to hear on the transition proposal and transition contract that such type of effort is already in place, and that we're going forward with our contractors. I think as the nation pauses, we need to pause to see what can be done in order to reduce costs, what we're going to look like in the weeks and months to come. But I really do think that this was an extraordinarily good meeting, Pat, that you've put together in light of very tough times, and I appreciate all the work that you've done.
Bob, thanks for the kind words. To be clear, I do not put myself in the same category as the governor. His leadership on this is personal to me because one of our daughters is an emergency room nurse, and 4 weeks ago she was handling heart attacks and appendix and broken legs, and now she and her colleagues are working on coronavirus all the time. And she and her colleagues that my wife and I know are not political, but they believe the governor is trying to get masks and ventilators, et cetera, and are awed by his work. I will say 2 points in addition. One is Bob and his team are running scenarios on all of the events that have happened, and obviously, as I noted, we're 3 weeks into this, and this story has only begun to be written. Point 2 is the service reduction you noted will reduce some cost. You're right. 2 points. One is the service reduction was not driven as a cost exercise. It was driven in terms of being able, A, to continue to bring first responders to and from work, but also to reduce density, social density among customers and employees. And, a week ago, subways were down 52%, maybe 8 days ago. And now they're down, 87%. The number from yesterday, we've gotten, we'll have a number at some point this morning for yesterday, for Tuesday. I think your points, Bob, are well taken. So I will ask for a motion to approve the. I make a motion to approve the described procurements. Do I have a second?
Second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And I'll note Mr. Zuckerman's abstention. Is there anyone else who's abstaining? Thank you. David Florio, please introduce the real estate items.
Mr. Chairman, real estate has 3 action items for consideration and approval. 2 are leases for travel convenience retail uses within New York City Transit. The first is Messrs. Bai and Bhavani for the operation of 4 locations in the 34th and 8th Avenue subway station. The second is with Mr. Sudhir Patel for the operation of 3 locations in the 34th and 7th Avenue subway station. And the last action item is the annual submission pursuant to statute of Real Estate Department's all agency property disposition guidelines as amended. The details of procedural changes are provided in Director's Desk. There are, Mr. Chairman, in addition, 6 information items, and I'm happy to answer any questions regarding them.
Thank you, David. I'll take them first. Any questions for David? I'll make a motion to approve the real estate item. Larry.
Second.
Thank you, Larry. Thanks. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Real estate items carry. Thank you. The next portion of the meeting is for the MTA Audit Committee. Monica Murray will record the votes of the Audit Committee members. Michelle Woods.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have 7 items requiring a vote. 4 items relate to internal MTA processes, and the remaining 3 relate to work performed by our external auditors, Deloitte. The Audit Committee could not vote on these items in February because the committee did not have a quorum. The 4 internal items are the minutes of the September 25th, 2019 Audit Committee meeting, the Audit Committee work plan, the revised enterprise risk management and internal control guidelines, and the proposed 2020 audit plan. There's one additional change to the work plan. The MTA Audit Committee, scheduled for April, will be moved to May. The MTA is required to adopt GASB Statement 84, in which the fiduciary activities of the MTA are reported in the financial statements. We anticipate having the draft financial statements available in April.
Thank you, Michelle. Any questions on these 4 items? I'll make a motion. Do I have a second?
I second that.
Thank you, Heda. These, all in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. The motion's passed. Michelle.
The remaining 3 items relate to work performed by our external auditors from Deloitte. The first is the audit of the third quarter 2019 consolidated financial statements. The second is the audit of the 2018 financial statements for the following pension plans: the Metro-North Cash Balance Plan, the MAPSTOA Pension Plan, the MTA Defined Benefits Pension Plan, the MTA Deferred Compensation Program, the Long Island Railroad Company Plan for additional pensions, and the MTA Retiree Welfare Benefit Plan. The final item is Deloitte's review of the MTA Inspector General's office. Jill Strohmeyer briefed the Audit Committee last month on the results of these reviews. She noted that there were no significant changes in accounting policies, uncorrected misstatements, or material misstatements. Jill is available remotely to answer any questions on these items.
Terrific. Any questions on these items? Can I get a motion, Heda?
So moved, Pat.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. The items are approved. Any questions before we break from board members? I understand Mr. Law had a question.
And I do as well, Pat.
Okay, Andrew?
Is Kevin going first, or?
Why don't we do it
I'm happy to
alphabetically?
go
You go
first.
first.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Okay,
Go ahead, Andrew.
reverse alphabetically. Kevin?
Oh, okay, Pat, just to be clear, in your presentation and from your discussion with Senator Chuck Schumer, the $25 billion that was included in the Federal Recovery Act, does that clearly state that we're getting $4 billion of that $25 billion, or are we now going to have to double our efforts to ensure that we get $4 billion of the $25 billion?
No, so Kevin, first, I want to note the extraordinary leadership of the Senate Minority Leader, Senator Schumer, on this in the entire New York congressional delegation on a bipartisan basis. The $25 billion for transit will yield $4 billion to the MTA, assuming again that the president signs it, and so that's the short answer.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Andrew.
Yes, one for you, Pat, and 2 for Sarah, if I can. When you said there were no new capital commitments, that implies that the existing capital program is proceeding, correct?
Well, look, what I said was, at this point in time, on a temporary basis, we are not making new capital commitments. Our primary objective at this point is to maximize cash and to improve our liquidity. And the steps that Bob took, for instance, took on behalf of the MTA, drawing down on the letter of credit, line of credit last week was in accord with that, and we're going to be very focused on maximizing our cash, both on the operating side and the capital side.
Got it. Thank you. And this would be for Sarah. Sarah, the suspension of the B, W, Z, and 6 and 7 expresses, does that constitute the 75% of existing service, or is there a further diminution of service in some places?
So, understand the question. First, I want to be clear that we're going to continue to evaluate it, Andrew. So,
sure.
we will continue to make changes. So, so the plan was built for 75%, or I think was actually built for 72% maybe. And we will continue to evaluate it. So we may go up to 75 or 80% or down further depending on what makes the most sense. The lines that you mentioned make up a significant piece of it, but I think not 100% of the 70-some%. But if you want separately, we can just follow up and give you like super precise.
Yeah, appreciate
details.
that.
Yeah, of course.
And the other question was, if some of these service cuts result in it's not possible social distancing that everybody wants, who will be telling you that? Will it be conductors? Will it be passengers? Will it be platform controllers? Who would actually be telling you that?
Yeah, great question. So Sally and I and Barry and others are literally in a constant conversation about it. So we're getting input from the public, we're getting input from crews, we're getting, we're all out in the system ourselves, and so we're trying to get information from wherever we can, and we're seeing a bunch from riders themselves, and we're taking a look at all of it to make sure that we're being responsive.
Terrific. Thank you so much.
And Andrew, to the extent that you're hearing from folks, obviously pass everything along that you're seeing.
Absolutely will.
Great. Any other questions or comments from board members? All right, I'm going to make a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all. We're ready. Okay, fine. Today at the board meeting, we talked about three things. One is the heroic work of MTA personnel across the agency. Subways, buses, Metro North, Long Island Railroad, bridges and tunnels. People are doing an extraordinary job. 52 of our colleagues are positive for the coronavirus. They are being monitored by health professionals, and we're very focused on their recovery and are thinking and praying for each of them. Two, we announced yesterday the MTA Essential Service, which on subways and buses will provide basically about 75% of the service normal weekday pre-pandemic. And the plan that Sarah and Craig and Kathy Rinaldi and Phil Eng put together can be tweaked. And Sarah noted that in Staten Island, the Amazon facility has been hiring more people, which is good. And online purchasing is up, so we've increased bus service to and from that facility. And then lastly, the Senate bill, Senator Schumer confirmed that the bill will have $25 billion for public transit agencies around the country, which will yield $4 billion to the MTA, largest amount in that program. As Bob Fran and I noted, that is part of the solution, but we've got a lot more actions to take. For one thing, we don't know how long the pandemic is going to continue and how extensive the financial damage is going to be. But the $4 billion is an extraordinary thing. Kudos to Senator Schumer, Speaker Pelosi, Chair Lowy, and a bipartisan group of elected officials from the New York congressional delegation. And with that, we'll take your questions.
Okay, so just a note on how this is going to work for folks following at home. We have 2 pool reporters in the room. We have 10 reporters in a Zoom room. We'll be calling on them so that everybody knows whose turn it is. Pat will be acknowledging them. The first question is Clayton Gusa of the Daily News, who is with us here in the room.
Yeah. Okay. Pat, 52 is still the number. Are you guys going to have an update? Are you guys testing more people? Where does that stand? And can you give us any sense of how many workers are quarantined at home right now?
So 52 is the number as of right now for positive cases. I don't have the quarantine number.
Have a quarantine number at any point to share with us? Are you guys keeping track of that? Like,
Yeah,
how are you monitoring that?
Yeah, Office of Health Services is monitoring it and is in charge of quarantine.
All right, next question from the Zoom room. It's David Meyer of the New York Post. David, go.
Yeah, Pat, this might be a better question for Jano, but I'm sure you could also chime in. At what point do you, at what point will you or you have to cut the cord on capital projects that are already ongoing and use or even plan for the next year?
At what point will what?
At what point do you cut the cord on capital contracts and use that money to fund the operating side?
So, David, as I said at the meeting, no new capital commitments are being made. Bob Foran and I and the entire agency are focused on maximizing the amount of cash and stopping spend. We've frankly turned off the spigot in terms of new capital commitments and on the operating side. We're really laser focused on maximizing cash.
So just if you could maybe explain that to me a little bit more, what about projects that are ongoing right now Are there projects that you put a hold on that money can then be reallocated to operating? And does doing so, the stopping capital projects that are already in progress, for money that's already been spent on some of them, have adverse impacts financially?
Well, look, we're 3 weeks into this. For instance, the Elks Train project is proceeding. We expect the tunnel work to be completed by April. I think it's very much a case-by-case situation, and we'll be looking at all our options. At this point, we don't plan to stop any ongoing project, but we're keeping all our options open and are reviewing this on a continuous basis.
Okay, just one more note for the reporters who are waiting in the Zoom room. Let us know that you want to ask a question by using the hand raise feature, as many of your colleagues have done. The next one is Jose Martinez of the City. Jose.
Hey there, Pat.
Hi, Jose.
What are you encouraging in crew quarters and in swing rooms to keep employees at a reasonable and safe social distance? There have been some photos where that would seem to be not the case.
Well, so a couple of things have been done, right? One is the service reduction will reduce significantly the number of people working on any given shift on any given day, point one. Point two, we've sent non-essential personnel who can work from home. So our focus has been, and for instance, things like the rear door boarding and the stopping cash collection, we're very focused on doing everything we can to minimize the health risk to our employees. So the service reduction, sending non-essential employees home are all in the interests of protecting customers and employees.
All right, next is Dana Rubenstein of Politico. Dana.
Hi. 2 questions for you. First, given the extremely precarious state of the MTA's finances and the uncertainty as to the future of those finances and your general lack of your tone is not all that celebratory regarding the $4 billion, suggesting that, you're going to need more. Why does it make sense to promise $90 million to the transformation consultants today?
So we didn't, Jana. What happened was, first, in terms of celebratory, I quoted Senator Schumer, right? The passage of the bill and $25 billion for public transit and $4 billion for the MTA is not a moment to celebrate. This was all done out of necessity. Look, our financial situation is precarious. We have taken steps and had some actions already in place in terms of the line of credit. And we are completely focused on minimizing cash spend and maximizing our options. We will need additional funding. We'll probably need legislative changes that we're discussing with the governor's office in Albany, and every step and option that we can build in to maximize the MTA's options, we're going to pursue.
But you did approve $90 million in contract.
Sorry, come back to that. No, we didn't. What we did is the contract was approved, as I said, until the pandemic is over and the state of emergency has been lifted. Not a dollar is going to be spent on consultants, period.
But it does commit you to spending that money once the state of emergency has been lifted?
No, that's a judgment we'll make at the time.
Okay, and second question, if I can.
Sure.
Do you know how many workers are not showing up to work for whatever reason, be it sickness or fear or quarantine?
Yeah, please.
Sarah Feinberg.
Yeah, so, wow. So we know that number daily. It's not in real time, so I can't tell you at this moment how many folks are out today, but we can tell you, later in the day how many folks didn't come in that day. I can't speak for the railroads, obviously, but that number reflects folks who have called out sick, folks who are on quarantine, and folks who would be out for any other reason. The the whole number is not as significant as you can imagine as where those numbers come from. So the quarantines are important because they hit specific facilities hard. So that's one of the issues.
Yeah.
I want to just say one other thing about the swing rooms and the break rooms, which is that one thing that we've implemented effective yesterday through Sally's good work is if you are in a break room and or if you're anywhere and we know that we no longer need your crew, we're sending you home. We're not having you hang out in a room on the off chance that we could use you. So we're sending, look, like I said this morning, we're desperately trying to send as many people home as we can so that we don't have folks in any kind of close quarters.
All right, next question is from Alfonso Castillo of Newsday. Alfonso.
Hi, everybody. Thanks. Firstly, given your new financial situation, can you rule out or can you say that it is on the table a potential revisiting of the planned fare increase that you'd consider later this year? Could it be more than the 4%? Could there be another fare increase in addition to that one?
Alfonso, there is no plan to impose or propose fare hikes beyond the 2% built into the financial plan. Beyond that, it'd be wildly premature. We're 3 weeks into this pandemic situation, but there's no plan to increase fares beyond what's in the financial plan.
Okay, and then following up on the question about crew slippage, is this also an issue on the Long Island Railroad, and could you quantify that at all? And similarly to what we heard Sarah talk about on transit, have there been any service issues, delays related to lacking train crews?
Well, look, train crew availability is an issue for every transit agency in the United States, and actually I go beyond that for every transit agency globally. The Long Island Railroad has been providing service. It will provide it beginning on Thursday, Friday in the new Long Island Railroad Essential Service Plan, and we believe we'll be able to provide that service going forward.
All right, the next question is from Brian Pascas of Cranes. Brian.
Yes, thank you. I want to talk about the $51 billion capital improvement plan. How is the MTA evaluating the budgeting of some of those proposals now that the coronavirus has unexpectedly changed the state's economic outlook?
Sorry, you're talking about the $51 billion capital plan? Is that the beginning?
Yes, the 2024 plan, and how are you evaluating budgeting of that?
Yeah, look, we're 3 weeks into the pandemic. We haven't made any decisions. We're doing a number of developing a number of scenarios and plans. No decisions have been made, and I think I'd leave it at that. It'd be wildly premature to speak in terms of specifics on that. It's just it's way too early.
I guess I just wanted to follow up. Bob Foran gave some pretty accurate numbers in terms of revenue shortfall. Just how does any of that play into what was allocated for the plan going forward over these next couple of years?
So fundamental premise of the MTA and every government and corporate agency in the country, more revenue is better, less revenue is not. Beyond that, it would be wildly premature to talk about that in any detail. No decisions have been made. We're not close to making decisions. Obviously, the amount of revenue and the extent of expenses are factors that will weigh into this. No decision's been made.
The next question is from Steve Nesson of WNYC and The Gothamist. Steve. Okay, we're going to move on. Oh, Steve, you there? All right, let's move on to Dave Colon with Streets Blog. Dave? Dave, you there?
Yeah, am I unmuted now?
You are on the air, Dave.
Okay, great. Pat, I know that you and Dana talked a little bit about the federal bailout. I'm just curious if you have a number on how much more the MTA might need going forward?
Well, look, as Bob Foran discussed at the meeting, One, great deal of uncertainty about all these things. We're 3 weeks into the pandemic, how long it lasts, what the recovery is, et cetera, things that are unknown. We are looking at every possible scenario. There's a number of steps that Bob and I and the team are putting together as options. The drawing down the $1 billion line of credit was a positive from a liquidity point of view. The passage of the $25 billion for transit, across the nation, and $4 billion for the MTA is incredibly good news. Before that, we're at $3.5 billion of liquidity for the end of March. It is we're very early in this pandemic. And we're going to take whatever actions are necessary and prudent to minimize cash spend and to give the MTA as much optionality as possible.
And do you think that the $25 billion overall was enough for the transit world?
I'm sorry?
The larger number nationally, I'm just curious. Do you think $25 billion was enough?
Look, I think the fact that a bill was passed on a national basis for public transit, was a good thing. I think $4 billion is a significant amount of money for the MTA. It doesn't solve all our problems, and it's going to depend on many things that are unknown, at this period of time, like how long the pandemic lasts, how long it has an effect on the economy, when the recovery starts, and how robust the recovery is, and lots of other factors that no one, including us, has any visibility into.
All right, we've got now Christina Goldbaum from the Times. Christina.
Can you hear me?
Hi, Christina.
We do.
Yeah. I want to go back to what we're talking about with the capital plan. I understand if it's too early to talk in specifics about changes, but do you think that it's fair to say that the crisis is going to force at least some kind of rethinking of the capital plan?
Well, look, we're going to look at every part of the MTA's expense structure, capital structure, revenue structure, et cetera. At this point, 3 weeks in, it's just wildly premature to make recommendations or judgments on any of that, including the capital plan. Obviously, the pandemic is a significant material event for every governmental body and business, and not-for-profit for that matter, entity in the United States, including the MTA.
Okay, and then we're, and so sorry, also just one more question, going back to the $3.8 billion in federal funds that you guys, have now. Today, Bob was saying that you actually need around $5 billion, generally if the trends that we're seeing continues. How long are the federal funds that you guys now have going to help shore up your operating budget before you're going to need more federal funds?
Well, more federal funds, but we're not just relying on the federal government. There are actions that we can take on our balance sheet that are being explored and will be discussed with the Finance Committee and with the board in the future. I think there's a whole range of actions that could be taken, and I can assure you we're going to nail every one of them down in terms of advantages, disadvantages, degree of difficulty in implementation, et cetera.
All right, we're going to go back and try Steve Nesson again with WNYC. Steve, you're with us? Steve? All right, strike two. Over to Paul Berger with the Wall Street Journal. Paul.
Hi, Pat. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Paul. How are you?
Great, thanks. Good, thank you. I just wanted to ask about the $4 billion. Am I right in remembering that that's what you asked for? And so I'm just wondering, if you asked for $4 billion and you got $4 billion, why are you not all that, not happy enough about it? And should you have asked for more?
Well, no, look, I'm happy, as I quoted Senator Schumer, right? This is not a time to be celebrating or opening champagne, right? But it is positive news, very positive news, given the challenges that the MTA faces, and I think a really positive piece of news. As I said, there are other actions that the MTA can take. We're looking at all of those. And we want to have as many options and as much optionality as possible built into the the capital structure, the expense structure, et cetera. And that's our goal.
But should you have asked for more, maybe?
You know, look, I think that we asked for a healthy number. We got a healthy number. I think that I think it is really positive news that we got $4 billion, and I applaud the work of Senator Schumer and Chair Lowy, et cetera.
And just a different subject regarding the worker outages. Sarah said that you do have a number, but she never actually said what the number is. So is it possible to find out how many workers were absent yesterday, for example?
Yeah, Paul, we'll consider that one, and Tim will get back to you.
And now we're going to come back to the room, Pat, for Dan Rivoli, New York 1.
How you doing? Just before I get to my question, can I just ask as a point of clarity on a term you use when you say capital commitments? Is that the same thing as saying contract? You're holding off on contracting out more work? Is that a commitment?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, for my question, I understand how the MTA arrived at $4 billion. I also understand how the MTA has been saying that they don't know the extent of this crisis and its impacts. When I did my original story, I asked Congressman Nadler, and he said, quote, they should have asked for more. Why didn't you ask for more than $4 billion, given that you don't know the extent of the coronavirus outbreak's impact on the MTA?
Look, going in and asking for numbers that we don't have any visibility into, we didn't think it'd be well received or prudent. We had great visibility into the $4 billion, getting the $4 billion and having it passed or having it put together last night and obviously sent hopefully soon to the President for signature is a major positive. There are, as I mentioned, a significant number of other steps that the MTA can take to increase liquidity by actions on our part. As I also mentioned, we're looking to working with the governor's office in terms of legislative changes in Albany, that changes to state law that we think will help. And there's a whole list of alternatives like that, both on the income and expense side and on the capital side.
And just to follow up with Interim President Sarah Feinberg said about the number of workers, and if anyone can correct me if I'm wrong, other agencies like NYPD are reporting regularly their people calling out, the reduction in workforce. Can New York City Transit just, for transparency's sake?
Tim will get back to you.
No, what I'm asking for is, for transparency's sake, can New York City Transit and the operating agencies regularly update on how many crew members are out, just for the sake of transparency going forward, either to the press or post it on its website?
Yeah, I mean, we've got nothing else to do right now, so I guess we could just compile those numbers. I mean, Dan, the numbers come in. They don't come in real time, right? So we can give you look back numbers. I'm not sure it helps, but we can consider it. But one thing to keep in mind is it also changes hourly. So sometimes people are quarantined for a certain amount of time. Sometimes they're quarantined for less. Sometimes we proactively quarantine because we want to make sure that we are being as protective as we can of our workforce. And then in follow-up, we realize that, in fact, some of those individuals weren't in close contact with someone who was exposed. And so we're going to bring people back. So I'll consider it. We'll consider it. But in the middle of a crisis, I'm not sure that continuing to run numbers is going to be the best use of time, but we will absolutely look at it.
And the last question is from Clayton Gusa right here in the room. Clayton.
I got one, and then I got a follow-up from Nesson, who just couldn't get through, if that's okay. The governor has talked time and again about the wave of cases crashing on the healthcare system, but it already appears, because of worker shortages, it's already started to break on the transit system in one form or another. Have you guys put any consideration into calling old transit workers, retired transit workers, out of retirement to come and help? Any consideration towards accelerating training for workers so that you have more bodies to throw at this problem?
Look, we're providing service. We've got crews to provide service on subways, buses, Long Island Railroad, and Metro North. We believe that'll continue to be the case. Obviously, sadly, MTA employees and transit workers are not exempt from the pandemic. But right now, we've got enough staffing to operate.
And then let me just ask one on Nesson's behalf, if that's all right. He's heard complaints from office workers at 2 Broadway MTHQ that so-called non-essential workers are in, but are still that are doing non-essential work, but are still told to come into the office. They say that they've shared work areas that are not being sanitized and don't have anyone to report their complaints to. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, so Clayton, take a look when you go into the lobby. The building's a ghost town. There's very few people here. On the 20th floor, I think on average, maybe today a little bit higher because of the board meeting. All the non-essential employees have gone home. Pat, the building 2 Broadway is being disinfected on a daily basis as well, period.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.